like to start by asking John to start. Do you have any questions?
Do I have any questions? Could you give us maybe a brief history of when we talk of formal poetry? Why do we even use that word?
Because of the great art crimes of the 20th century. I said because of the great art crimes of the 20th century, when all things representational, figurative, Western intellectual tradition oriented were shunned, and everything went, and you had to call those things something all of a sudden. So they started becoming called formal. And formal has two meanings, really. Formal meaning sort of stodgy, which I think a lot of people associate.
Can you hear that? In other words, some people think that formalism is stodgy.
It's formal like you wear your Sunday best. But formal, truly means poetry written in a form, written with meter, in stanzas, rhyme patterns, poetry that has the traditional patterns, which are all based on patterns of speech and, of course, is ancient history to the forms of poetry.
The art crimes of the 20th century. I think Rick also realizes that the development of modern verse and modern art happened much earlier than the 20th century. There was what we would now call perhaps not even nonsense poetry, but sound poetry developed in Munich and Berlin in the 1880s, 1890s. So,
on all these things fascinate me. I mean, John asked me to be in this discussion, no doubt, because I write almost exclusively in form. And it's not out of any sort of bigotry, I would hope, against anything else. I love free verse. I've written free verse. I find free verse extremely challenging. I find a lot of really bad free verse and a lot of really good free verse, and the same can be said for formal poetry. But the reason that I write in form is that writing in form brings from me things that I wouldn't get to personally. It's a personal thing, and a lot of people I know feel the same way. I wouldn't get to just writing with my head on a piece of paper and using my imagination. A form makes you challenge what you would have written. And it means you either get there in a different way or go someplace else. And it makes you write a 200-page poem when you thought you were going to do a sonnet. It brings you someplace that you might not have gotten to. The thing I compare it to, and it's not an exact analogy, is the drawing class where you don't look at your hand. Anybody who's taken serious art lessons has taken this drawing class. When you look at the model, you don't look at your hand, and you turn your head off. You don't say, well, there's 5 fingers, and then this knuckle's closer than that one. You look at the form of the model. With writing in form, you really kind of are forced to get out of a more cerebral approach. At the same time, paradoxically, you're thinking through things that you wouldn't normally be thinking. It's a wonderful paradox, but the end of it for me is that it brings something out of me, which I think art is all about.
Rick also mentioned in his discussion of the 20th century that this really was the point at which we saw the necessity, as he pointed out, of creating this term formal to describe what had happened before there was such a thing as free verse, or work that didn't necessarily have a particular form. The reason why people didn't even have the term formal before that is because all verse, all poetry, all verse and lyric and so forth did come out. It was always written in some type of meter or form. In the various early days, anthropologists said, especially here on this continent among the Native Americans, that most, besides imitating the birds, the bird sounds and bees and animals, but it comes from the heartbeat. So there's already this idea that when man and woman first started making music and making poetry, that it already had an inherent beat or meter. And a lot of early poetry was sung or recited in a sort of with a beat. Not all of it was sung, but certainly all of it had some type of what we would say beat.